City of Norco City Council meeting agenda budget workshop for Wednesday, May 2nd, 4 p.m. Roll call, please.
Council members Newton.
Here.
Hannah.
Here.
Bash.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer.
Here.
Mayor Hoffman.
Here.
All present.
Get the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Bash, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. Cheryl, you're right. There's more than 4 people. Thank you. All right. This is a City Council business item, a presentation of the draft fiscal year 2018-19 operating budget. And Andy, I'll leave it to you and your staff.
Yes, before I turn it over to Gina Shukhard, who is our finance director, I'd like to make a couple of comments. The purpose of the study session this evening is to go over our FY 2018-2019 operating budget. The information that staff will be reviewing this evening is based on a status quo budget. What that means is that the numbers have been compiled based on existing levels of city services and programs. This is just the beginning of the process. Staff is still reviewing these numbers, and we have several more opportunities in the future to look at these numbers. And throughout that process, as we review the numbers, we'll be making additional recommendations to the City Council. We still have about 3 more opportunities to look at these presentations that you're about to look at tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to Gina to go over the presentation.
Gina, just one thing. This is our budget meeting, and the city manager and I have talked. If we don't want to rush through this because we do have another workshop prior to the Tuesday in 2 weeks for the infrastructure and CIP funding, but which we probably will not go as lengthy. So please don't rush through your presentations. If we have to carry over this one to the next one, we will. Thank you.
Good evening, or good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm pleased to present the draft budget for today's workshop for fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. This is the overview we will be taking today. Like what was mentioned, we may not complete every item that's on this page, but we will start with the highlights of the operating funds for the major funds, the review of the summaries for general fund revenues and expenditures, and the review of our trends over the last few years, and a summary of our overall water revenues and expenditures, sewer fund revenues and expenditures, gas tax and revenues and expenditures, and then a detailed review of expenditures and requests, if any, by departments and programs. And then finally, review of potential general fund budget cuts. Now for operating highlights. The general fund revenue is projected to be $19.3 million and a total estimated expenditure of $21.2 million. This creates a projected structural deficit of $1.9 million for fiscal year 18-19. In terms of expenditures, the projected general fund expenditure budget is based on the following assumptions: maintaining existing non-safety service levels with no new programs or employees, provides for a 6% annual adjustment for sheriff services, continues to provide funding for 1 traffic enforcement deputy and 1 community services officer, provides for annual contractual increase of 4% for CAL FIRE services. The budget does not provide funding for district election potential litigation. It continues to provide funding to pay down liability for post-retirement healthcare costs, as well as PAYGO retiree healthcare cost increases, provides funding to pay for pass-through employer pension rate increases. City employees continue to pay their full share of employee portion of pension contribution. And the preliminary budget includes a 3% salary adjustment for employees. The budget includes funding for increased water utility costs and also includes funding for a comprehensive fee study to ensure costs of providing services are being recovered. And finally, it provides for funding for a potential revenue measure and election. And one more item, for the second year, we're discontinuing $75,000 transfer to NPDS, which is National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Fund, due to the available fund balance to address the gap in fiscal year 18-19. And we'll look at that slide later. In terms of revenues for the general fund, the fiscal year 18-19 revenues are relatively flat as compared to 17-18. The revenues are projected to increase by only $100,000 as compared to the amended 17-18 budget, and about $15,000 as compared to the estimated year-end budget. Sales tax is anticipated to decrease by 1% in 18-19, and you might recall that when we presented the year-end for last year, we discussed that the state of California had not given us our full allocation for last year, for 17-18. They gave it for 16-17, they gave it to us in 17-18. So you'll see a bump up. That is not going to continue in the future. Property tax is anticipated to increase by 1% in 18-19, with a slight increase in projected assessed values. The refuse franchise fee is projected to increase due to the final implementation of the franchise fee with waste management. And in terms of overhead reimbursements, we continue to anticipate a loss of $108,000 annually for the former redevelopment RDA employees from the State Department of Finance due to ongoing disputes. So this is reimbursement of pension and OPEB liabilities. We're going to have an overview now of the general fund revenues, and if you have a budget document, you can turn to those pages. That gives you more detail. Regarding general fund revenues overall, you'll see it's a minor increase. It's relatively flat. You'll see the decrease in sales tax and a nice increase in motor vehicle license fee. This is given to us by the state of California and very predictable revenue source. Our property tax is at 1% increase. Franchise fees, slight increase as a result of the final increase in waste management franchise fees. Overhead transfers, a slight increase of 3%. Charges for services, a slight decrease. Every year we decrease these revenues based on a conservative estimate of our planning and development fees. Charges for services, a slight decrease here. A part of this revenue, I just discussed that. Other taxes, slight increase of 2%. And other revenues are decreasing by 10%. Let's see. Excuse me. Interest income is increasing by 2%, and fines and intergovernmental revenues are increasing by 2%. So basically flat over this period of time. And we'll go into detail in each one of those categories. In terms of sales tax, again, we've got a slight, as you recall, our auto sales have been peaking across the state of California, and we're not anticipating that demand to continue over the next few years. In terms of the sales tax consultants' projections, we are using them, but we're also increasing a slight amount for Norco Village. Property tax, we've been very fortunate to get increased tax increment distribution, and a part of that has to do with the bond refinancing we did, about $50,000 and up to $75,000 a year. And we're going to project that we are going to continue to have these distributions through the tax increment process. This is a chart you're familiar with. This is data from 16-17. We won't have this updated until most likely the end of the year for 17-18 figures. And this is how much the city of Norco creates in terms of sales taxes, $50.4 million, and we did that in, again, 16-17. And this is how it's distributed. And I've kind of dulled out the other pie slices just to show the amount that the city of Norco receives as a result of everybody spending their money here in Norco. The rest of the money goes to the county and Riverside Transportation, the State General Fund, and Countywide Transportation Fund. The city gets about, in that particular time, $6.5 million, and it has increased. Again, this is also 16-17 data. This is how much property tax the city of Norco generates. It's $30.7 million, and you can see the city receives only 5%. And the county receives $7.3 million general fund, and community college, school districts, successor agencies, the County Office of Education, and Special District. I actually went on the county's website to review their budget, and property tax is the largest revenue they receive, and millions, $350 million at least. Sales tax, at least in their general fund, is only about $30 million. So our sales tax most likely gets distributed to other enterprises. Other taxes consist of public safety sales tax, property transfer tax, occupancy tax, a TOT, and business license. And in our projection that you saw previously, we're expecting about a 5% increase in our TOT. Franchise fees includes cable television, electric, gas, and refuse franchise fees, and this is a 3% increase, largely due to the refuse franchise rate increase with waste management for this coming year. Motor vehicle license fees, again, this is the share the city receives from the state of California, and that's about a 4% increase. Interest and lease income consists of revenues derived from cell towers, interest income, and Silver Lake's rental and lease income. Then the projected 2% increase is based on existing cell tower agreements and projected interest income, even though we are anticipating signing new contracts in the future that will be brought back at mid-year. Charges for service includes planning division fees, building fees, engineering fees, parks and recreation fees, and these fees are projected to decrease by 3% as compared to year-end because we're taking a conservative look, and development may actually be decreasing in terms of the revenue received in the general fund, but not for other funds, for development funds. Other revenues, key revenues included in this category are our VEMS system, dog licenses, penalties, fire inspection fees, fire plan check fees. And the revenue is projected to decrease by 10%, primarily to a decrease in one-time revenue related to administrative reimbursement for bond refunding. The overhead transfers are reimbursements of allocated costs by other funds to the general fund, and this estimate continues to not show the receipt of successor agency reimbursement of unfunded pension and retiree health care liabilities, that $108,000. We are not anticipating receiving that, but we're hopeful in the future.
And Gina, before you go into expenditures,
Sure.
can I ask council if they have any questions on any of the revenues on this budget? Greg, do you have any? Oh, okay, Berwin, I'm sorry.
On page 7, you said it was going to increase, the TOT tax would increase probably by 2%.
Correct.
Yeah, 5%. Is that just counting the hotels we've got now, or not counting any of the new ones that are supposed to come in?
No, it does not anticipate future development.
Okay, thank you.
And Robin?
Just a quick question on the franchise fee. You had said refuse franchise fees are going up. Are we seeing a decrease in like the cable franchise fees because people are getting their entertainment elsewhere?
We are, and I reduced it at mid-year, and I've maintained that reduction in this coming budget. Yes, we're
Okay.
seeing a difference with DirecTV, and
Well, all the online Netflix and
Correct.
Hulu and all that stuff, so,
it will be slowly going down.
okay. Thanks.
Kevin? Greg?
Thanks. Gina, when was the last time we did a comprehensive fee study?
We've done revisions over the years. I want
Right.
to say 2009, and we've done another comprehensive one back in 2003.
Okay, so 2009 is the last one?
I believe we did a study back in 2012.
11,
May
okay.
2012.
2012.
Most recent one.
I realize we've done adjustments, but
And in between, In between the comprehensive fee schedule, we do a cost of living adjustments to the fees every year.
Thank you.
I got one, Gina. You have 4% for the motor vehicle license fee. Is that based upon the application of SB1 on the raised in fees? And if that gets repealed, well, what will that do to that?
SB1 wouldn't impact motor vehicle license fee. It would impact the gas tax fee, which would be in the gas tax, that actually be now in the CIP fund related to street maintenance. But it does not impact motor vehicle license fees.
Even though that Californians got a raise in their fees, annual fees,
For
license fees.
For DMV?
Registration fees, yes. Do you know, Andy?
Yes, what you're referring to, Mr. Mayor, is the SB1 revenues.
Correct.
Which part of that comes from gas tax increase. Those revenues are not being accounted in the general fund.
Okay, so
They will be accounted in our street fund, and we'll review those when we look at the capital improvement program budget, hopefully in 2 weeks. But having said that, one of the things Gina and I talked about is these estimates of increased 4%. Looks pretty significant, but that's information that has been provided to us by a consultant, our tax consultant. So we are going with that number, but we're going to keep a watchful eye on that to be sure that this projected 4% increase is real. And if not, obviously, when we come back for a mid-year budget adjustment, we will make the necessary adjustment if necessary.
Okay. I just, if you can, when you come back and check, because part of Sacramento's deal with SB1 also included increasing your annual licensing fee, registration fee.
That's all part of SB1.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying is those aren't the funds that we get out of this, out of the DMV, out of the ones listed here, the motor vehicle license fees.
What the mayor is asking is just so we confirm with HDL that none of that is being included in these numbers that they're giving us. And we'll
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. No other questions on to expenditures?
The general fund expenditures are anticipated to be $21.2 million for fiscal year 18-19. And this is a pie chart with no carrots, like Berwin requested, for basically indicating all of the departments. And we've got some consolidated pie slices. As you can see, public safety is the largest portion of the pie, with sheriff and crossing guards at $6.5 million, fire anticipated to be $4.4 million, but I should indicate that they do tend to come in lower than their budget amounts, and we'll be discussing that briefly regarding their 17-18 projection. Parks and Recreation is $2.9 million at 14%. Animal Control is 3% at $665,000, and Non-Departmental is $2.4 million. This is lower than last year because we don't have some transfers to the CIP. Admin, Finance, and Economic Development is $1.7 million. Public Works and Engineering is $348,000. The majority of those expenditures are in enterprise funds, water and sewer. And Planning and Building and Code, $1 million. And City Council and City Attorney, $348,000. A We People Program, $310,000. And Senior Citizen at $208,000. And this is similar information in a table format. We are comparing the amended budget to the preliminary budget. And going down from the Sheriff's Department, it's a $571,000 increase. This is fully funding the Traffic Enforcement Deputy as well as the CSO, Communication Service Officer, and additional increase in internal costs related to the contract. Fire suppression and EMS is increasing, anticipated $171,000. Again, that may not occur. Parks and Building Recreation is increasing by $224,000. And again, this is comparing to amended budget. And Non-departmental is decreasing by $382,000. This is a net decrease. As we mentioned earlier, we have some funding for a consultant related to a potential ballot measure, as well as the cost allocation study. So it's a net decrease related to the $550,000 transfer we did in 17-18 for capital projects related to Wayne Macon. Administration, Finance, and Economic Development increasing by $95,000. Planning, Building, and Code by $41,000. Animal Control by $40,000, and a minor decrease in City Council and City Attorney. Public Works and Engineering increasing by $13,000, and We People Team Program by $18,000, and Senior Citizens increasing by $48,000, for a net total of $842,000 budget-to-budget comparison, a 4% increase. Any questions on expenditures? We will be going into more detail later. Okay. Sure.
And you probably cover it in a little bit. In your expenditures under sheriff protection, what number are you setting aside for the additional traffic deputy and additional CSO? Is that number in the?
It is.
The $5.9 million?
Yes, it's fully funded.
And what's that amount?
That amount.
Or if you're going to get to it later, it's fine.
I'll get it, the net increase is $571. I can get you the exact dollar amount. It's around $450,000, $400,000.
And are we still funding the additional overtime deputies for traffic enforcement?
We left some.
In this number?
So, no, those numbers are not doubled up. If you have observed, what we are doing in the current fiscal year is we are using the savings generated by not filling those two positions to do traffic enforcement on an overtime basis.
Correct. Okay.
So going into next fiscal year, assuming we fill those two positions, then there is no allocation to do that. However, the Sheriff's Department next year, there were some special traffic enforcement grant that we didn't get the previous year that appears to be available next fiscal year that will help with that situation.
Okay. Thank you.
This particular graph shows the change in revenue and expenditures since fiscal year 2009-2010, and the recent change in terms of expenditures being greater than revenues in fiscal year 17-18. You can see if you can see the yellow line below, that is our fund balance in the general fund. And it's decreasing now, of course, and I'll be going into that in the next slide. This is the recent trend. Our audited fund balance as of June 30th, 2017, resulted in a fund balance of $11.3 million. And during the year, this fiscal year, from July to June, we're estimating year-end revenues to be $19.3 million, with expenditures being $20 million. This results in a deficit of $683,000, which, as you recall, is significantly less than the $1.9, nearly $2 million we presented last year at this time. And the reason, as you can see below in the asterisks, is the deficit was reduced by about $826,000 in net revenues, some of them one time, and $400,000 in net expenditure savings, with the majority of the expenditure savings being the $479,000 from the delay in filling the sheriff's contract. So our estimated fund balance of July 1st, 2018 we're estimating to be $10.6 million. And moving forward to the coming year, as we've discussed, our estimated revenues are anticipated to be $9.3 million, with estimated expenditures at $21.2 million for a deficit of $1.8. Estimated fund balance of June 30th at $8.8 million. Fund balance. Any questions?
Any questions, staff? Go ahead, Jean.
And now we'll move on to the summary of water fund revenues and expenditures. And we'll focus on some highlights and then get into a little bit of detail regarding the status of the water fund. The projected 18-19 water fund assumptions are the following. We have approved water rates, which will be effective July 1st, 2018, increased water rates. And we also have purchased water costs are estimated to be based on obligations under take or pay purchase water contracts, which means we budget for the full amount. And the increase in contractual services for one-time reservoir inspection, cleaning, and on-call contractor assistance for street paving after main breaks. And I should remind you, this is the operating fund only, not the capital fund. In fiscal year 18-19, total water projected revenues are anticipated to be $12.9 million. The total expenditures at $10.7 million. The difference between revenues and expenditures, or $2.2 million, is added to what's called the working capital balance, working fund balance. So what happens at that, I'll continue with the next bullet. The water fund's working capital balance will annually be reviewed for the ability to make transfers to the operating and rate stabilization reserves and water capital fund for the funding of capital projects. So we have had a buildup of reserves over the last 2 years, and we'll get into that in a moment. And that ends up being called our working capital balance, unlike the general fund, which is called general fund balance. The operating reserve equates to 3 months of the cost of water operations. The current goal is $2.6 million in reserves within 5 years, or fiscal year 2021. The clock started ticking on this the moment we passed our first rate increase. The rate stabilization reserves target is $2 million by 2026. This equates to about $222,000 allocated per year. And our estimated working capital balance is $5.2 million at the end of June 30th, 2017. And this is accumulation over the last 2 years since our first rate increase. Our estimated working capital balance as a result of, at the end of, I think I got my dates off on that. There should be June 30th, 2018. The first bullet, and June 30th, 2019, the second bullet. So at the end of next year, working capital balance should be $2.2 million. A total of $1.5 million will be allocated for operating reserves, $444,000 for rate stabilization, and a total of $5.4 million will be available for capital allocation for sewer projects. So as a result of that accumulation of working capital balance, we are able to allocate $1.5 million to operating reserves and increase our rate stabilization, catch that up, and provide a total of $5.4 million to the CIP water projects. And your budget goes into a little bit more detail on that. And this is a summary of our water fund revenues by type. Domestic water sales is $11.4 million, and irrigation's $1.1 million, and other revenues are $246,000. The summary of projected water fund expenditures by category. As you can see, the budget's increasing by about 6% from budget to budget, and this is an apples-to-apples comparison. As you can see, we're fully budgeting for the purchased water costs that we're required to do, and then at year-end, Chad will go into more of a discussion on how that ends up happening if we were able to reduce our expenditure there based on our relationship with the City of Corona. And maintenance supplies and services and rentals are going up by about 16%. And the increases are, of course, based on the fact that we have the revenue to create these to have these expenditures available and to start maintenance. And this is a pie chart of the water fund expenditures. Purchased water is the largest expenditure at $6.1 million. Second, salaries and benefits of $1.1 million. And we have a shared department. Part, of course, public works expenditures as well as finance-related expenditures are in that salary and benefits pie chart. And then you go to overhead reimbursements for $615,000, contractual for $900,000, maintenance and rentals $610,000, and debt service at $955,000. Internal service fund charges are charges related to equipment replacement and IT and insurance. And that's a brief overview of the water fund. It's, as I indicated, good news in terms of building our capital fund balance for reserves and CIP projects.
Any questions, council, for staff on the water fund?
Gina, on debt service, as we have done in the past with our reoccurring bonds, is there any way to reduce our debt service obligations?
Yes, there is, but not currently. We are looking at doing that in the fall of 2019, and currently we can't do an advance refunding, and we have a certain due date when we can actually begin that. So it'll be the fall of 2019. We're hoping that interest rates will be favorable.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead to the sewer then, if no other questions.
The fiscal year 18-19 sewer fund assumptions are based on the following. The sewer fund revenues are based on existing sewer rate structure. There will not be a rate increase as of July 1st. The projected increase in expenditures compared to 18-19 total budget are due to increased budget for sewer line cleaning, root chemical treatment, roach treatment, grease treatment, electrical maintenance, and employee training. The expansion of the Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority treatment plant is now complete, and the budget does include an increase in managing and operating the new treatment plant, as well as a payment of the city's portion of the construction loan.
Gina, if I could re-emphasize what you said with respect to the sewer rates. The sewer studies that was done about a little less than 2 years ago included adjustment to the sewer rate that should begin July 1 of this fiscal year, July 1 of next fiscal year, or July 1 of this calendar year. And based on how the sewer fund is currently doing in terms of the ability to generate cash flows, to fund operating expenditures, as well as set money aside to do capital improvements, we've decided to put that sewer rate increase in abeyance until and re-examine if that rate increase will be needed in the future.
And we will show you why we've moved forward with that decision. The sewer fund projected revenues are $7.9 million. Total projected expenditures are $6.7. The difference between revenues and expenditures, or $1.2 million, is added to the working capital fund balance for the sewer fund. And as I said previously, this is similar to the water fund. The sewer fund's working capital balance will annually be reviewed for the ability to make transfers to the operating reserve and sewer capital fund for the funding of capital projects. The sewer fund does not have a rate stabilization fund. The operating reserves equates to 3 months of the cost of sewer operations. The current goal is $1.6 million in reserves. The estimating working capital fund balance is $7.7 million at the end of, and again, I guess I've made this typo, end of this year, June 30th, 2018. And that's a result of the last few years of, probably more than the last few years of accumulated reserves and capital fund balance for that fund, and the estimated working capital balance of 2.7 at the end of fiscal year 19, or June 30th, 2019. The total reserve requirement of $1.6 million will be met and allocated for operating reserves, and a total of $7.2 million will be available for capital allocation for sewer projects, and Chad will go into that more in the CIP presentation. This chart table indicates the difference between the budget of the current year and the budget that we're presenting. In terms of contractual services, we're seeing about a 3% increase. In that area, debt service, 11%. And the reason for the increase in debt service is the first payment of the State Water Resources Board loan that we have, and it's a joint loan, and we'll be beginning payments to that in this next fiscal year, with most likely a slight accrual in the current year. Salary and benefits, 13% increase, and 22% increase for internal funds. Again, that's equipment replacement, IT-related cost, insurance, and a slight decrease in maintenance, supplies, services, and rentals, for a net increase of 7%. And this is a pie chart of the categories. Contractual services, of course, at 2.6 million, the largest slice, and 1.9 million for the debt service that I mentioned, as well as our water and sewer bond. Salaries and benefits at $1.1 million, and overhead and reimbursements at $428,000, and internal service fund costs of $214,000. Any questions on sewer fund?
Any questions of council for Gina? Seeing none, go ahead, Gina.
We'll briefly go over the gas tax fund, revenue and expenditures. And as a reminder, our SB1 funds are going to be in the capital street maintenance fund, not in the gas tax fund. The city share, this includes the city share of state allocation of gas tax revenues. Use of revenue is restricted to eligible streets and road work such as signal maintenance, pothole repairs, traffic lights, utilities, tree trimming, etc. The total estimated revenues of $694,000 is anticipated for fiscal year 18-19. Total estimated expenditures of $878,000 provides increased funding to begin a 5-year tree trimming schedule throughout the city. The fund balance at year end at June 30th, 2019 is anticipated to be $323,000. And now we'll move into, if there's any questions on gas tax, we'll move into expenditures by departments. And police and fire are not here this evening. I can go, would you?
Quickly here, the total budget for the police department for the next coming fiscal year 18-19 is $6.17 million. And the total general fund budget for the contract is $6.17 million. And the total budget in the general fund is approximately $6.5 million. Total all Sheriff's Department budget is $6.6 million. The reason for that is that a portion of their budget is funded through grant. And that's the difference between what the total budget is and what is being paid from the general fund. In terms of fiscal year 2017-2018 amended budget, we included, that includes approximately $137,000 that is earmarked for overtime. And again, as we talked a moment ago, that overtime budget is taken out of the savings as a result of holding the traffic enforcement officer and community service officer positions vacant. The budget for next year, 18-19, includes a plan to fill those two positions, at least in the numbers that we're looking at tonight. And it also includes a 6% projected increase in the contract amount from FY 2018 19 to FY 18-19. So there is an increase from this current fiscal year to next fiscal year of 6%. That is the percentage that has been provided to us by the Sheriff's Department. We usually go slightly lower than what they tell us to budget for. The worst case scenario, I understand, is 8%. But actually, I think they gave us the rate 5 to 7%. So we go in between. So the rate, this is halfway between 5 and 7%. In terms of what that amounts to as far as increase to this budget is about $571,000. So again, that 12% you're looking, which is the overall increase, is partially because we are projecting to fill the 2 positions next year, which are not currently accounted for in this fiscal year. Any questions on the police department budget?
Any questions, Andy, on that? Berwin? Robin? Greg? Kevin? Andy, I have one. Did the lieutenant or the department give you any idea when they anticipate filling that position or those 2 positions?
Yes, the hope is that the position will be filled beginning of next fiscal year, which is July 1 of 2018.
Okay. So currently, if those positions were filled, it would add $451,000, a little over that, to the budget.
That's about close to what the number should be.
Okay, so, and if they weren't filled, that would...
We would reduce that budget.
We would reduce the budget by that amount.
Yes.
But in the past, we've always, before this, we allocated about $100,000 a year for overtime. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, separately.
Separately. So, okay. So, all right. Just making sure we're talking the same way. Thank you.
The fire department budget, fire department contract, we have 3 layers there for you to look at. The fire contract overall specifically is $4.4 million, and that's a 4% increase based, if you compare it to the budget. And as mentioned earlier, they haven't spent to the full amount that we budget for, so it usually comes in less. And this year in particular, looking at the year-end 17-18, we are still being very conservative in maintaining our original amended budget allocation, although we feel that the amount may be less and for year-end. The total of all funds is 4%. The CAL FIRE contract is increasing by $170,000 as compared to amended budget, basically due to MOU agreements between the state of California and CAL FIRE. And as a reminder, we have $51,600 allocated or additional funding from the equipment replacement fund. And this helps to reduce the budget as well. Fiscal and support services. Any questions on fire?
Go ahead, Kevin.
I believe that's cheaper than 2005. I think we're still under that amount, aren't we?
Yeah, we are significantly
under.
By the way, this is just a budget number.
Right.
And as Gina pointed out, over the last several years, contract with CAL FIRE, those always coming on the budget. Actually, third quarter invoice. That will give us a clue as expected at the end of this fiscal year. And that will...
Yeah, I'm pleased with that, only just as an observation, because we were told that by this time, if we switched, we would have a $10 million CAL FIRE bill, and so it's still several $100,000 under that 2005 paycheck. Thank you.
Go ahead, Gina.
Fiscal and support services is supported by 3 funds, the general fund, water fund, and sewer fund. Fiscal and Support Services budget will be $1.4 million in fiscal year 18-19, and that is a 7% increase as compared to the amended budget of 1.3. The 17-18 estimated expenditures are below amended budget amounts due to salary and benefit savings. And the 18-19 budget expenditures for the general fund are increasing about $31,000, or 5% primarily due to pension-related costs and internal fund charges, and that's the general fund portion. The base budget includes conferences and training for our new manager and staff, as well as funding for more efficient modifications to the financial system and resulting reports. Any questions on?
Again, I want to remind the City Council and those who are in the audience, we have the detailed numbers that support the summary numbers that are being presented tonight. These numbers will be available for anyone to examine in more details and line item by line item. So those in the binders that have been provided to the City Council, and we'll make those available for the public as well to take a look at if you desire to do so.
Thank you, Andy. Go ahead, Gina.
Question, Gina. Base budget would include more efficient modifications of the financial system and resulting reports. Is there any money allocated to upgrade software so that we would be more efficient with business licenses and yard sale permits that could be purchased online?
Yes, we are planning on upgrading our business license program to provide online permits, as well as it'll have the ability to take yard sale permits online.
And we're allowing for that in this?
It is actually in the current year budget.
Okay.
And it could merge into next year's as well.
Okay.
But yes.
And just to add to that, Councilmember, is that we are reviewed RFPs for that software package currently right now, and Steve's office is vetting that process through.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thanks.
Go ahead, Gina.
Andy?
This is the City Manager Department budget. Really no change in the budget. It's flat from this current fiscal year to next fiscal year. Any change in that budget number is as a result of pension cost. Basically, this is the amount where the city is required to contribute towards the cost of pension, and that number is determined by California Public Employees Retirement System. You'll be hearing this throughout this budget presentation. The real cost that is impacting this budget as far as staffing cost is concerned, those costs that are related to pension rate increases. Have any questions?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Andy, could you just talk a little bit about what this budget all entails, aside from just maybe break it down a little bit, just a bit?
If you go to page, this right here. Let's quickly take a look at that.
101.
It's page 105.
Page 106.
106.
Yeah. So this budget numbers you're looking at includes salaries and benefits, and salaries includes the actual compensations to staff, and it also includes, again, as I stated, contribution towards pension. It includes the city's portion of health insurance payments. It includes compensation for absences that are compensated, such as any sick leave, any vacations, and any administrative leaves that are granted to staff. The other category that is in this budget is conferences and meetings, and then there are no supplies and services in this budget because the city manager's department steals from other departments. So, and then there are operations and utilities, and this is essentially portable communication device. And then the cost that is allocated to the city manager's office due to the operations and maintenance of our information technology systems.
Yeah, my point is that it's not what we're paying you. Somebody might go, that's what he gets paid. It's actually, there's many things that are layered into this. I wanted to make sure we're clear on that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Gina.
City Clerk?
For this current fiscal year, the estimated expenditures are below budgeted amounts due to savings in part-time salary and benefits, as well as professional development. And for next fiscal year, there is an increase for the budgeted expenditures of 20%, primarily due to the election costs for the November 2018 election.
Any questions for Cheryl? Oh, go ahead, Robin.
Cheryl, with us going to our elections on even-numbered years, is that saving the city money, or is the cost of an election the same regardless of it's an even year or an odd-numbered year?
The cost is the same.
It's the same. Okay, thank you.
Most, if I can add to that, because of SB 415, most other cities have switched over to even-numbered years. So we're all kind of in the same schedule. So there's really no change in the costs.
Does your budget allow for any additional part-time help
At this time,
based on the volume of work you have in the upcoming elections and some other issues that are coming forward?
I don't believe that that's part of the budget for next fiscal year.
Now, the numbers that you're looking at, Councilmember Newton, does include part-time staffing. However, as we will be going over some recommended potential costs to the budget, and those we'll be discussing them at the next City Council study session.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions. I guess economic development. Roger, that's you, huh?
It is. The estimated expenditures for this fiscal year are a little lower than anticipated, largely due to the fact that we've been able to internalize a lot of our promotional marketing materials. It's a capability that we're very pleased to have, and it will reduce costs in the future as well. The 2018-19 expenditures will be 8% lower than the current fiscal year budget due to a reduction in contractual services, some of those related to historic preservation. The gateway sign revenues have plateaued as a result. So both revenue and expenditures have leveled out somewhat, but we are anticipating embarking on a more aggressive marketing campaign, and overall that's been a success, however. And the budget for the next fiscal year also includes a continued presence at the ICSC conference. We may be looking at a reduced footprint, perhaps going for fewer days and eliminating the expense of having a booth. But we feel we can be fully engaged without the current level of expenditure.
Any questions of economic development? Seeing none. And human resource, Andy, you get this one?
Yes, I'll highlight this one quickly. This is the same budget as every other budget in the city. Again, the change here is mainly related to potential salary adjustments as well as pension cost increases.
Any questions on this one? No. Seeing none, we'll go in the non-departmental section. Is this Gina or?
I will take that. Budget. This is one of the bigger general fund budgets. In this department, we use this non-department to budget those items that are not specifically traceable to a particular department. And so some of the big items that are included in this budget that I do want to highlight is pension cost that the city had liability for prior to the contracting of the fire department. So next year, that number is about $458,000. The other big items, other big items in this budget includes retiree medical insurance. This is the bill we receive from California Public Employees Retirement on a monthly basis to pay for premium for those employees who retired from the city, who were eligible at the time they retired to receive medical benefits. That for next year is estimated to cost the city approximately $900,000. And in addition to that cost that we pay on a monthly basis to California Public Employees Retirement System, another $300,000 is being set aside in a trust fund to catch up for medical benefits that should have already been funded at the time employee retires. And this is what is generally described as unfunded liability on the medical side. And to fund that, we have been setting aside $300,000 in the general fund. And over time, we have built a good amount of money in that trust account. The purpose of that is once we meet those liability requirements, hopefully there will be no need for us to set this money aside. That can then be used to fund for retiree medical insurance costs. The other item I do want to highlight here that is another cost to this department or non-department is the cost of the city's insurance programs. The premium that the city pays to cover for general liability as well as workers' comp. In addition to that, the actual settlements that the city pays out for claims under general liability as well as claims under workers' comp programs. And this will be costs that are within the city's self-insurance retention amount. Any amount over that is what we pay the premiums for, and that is paid by the third party who provides insurance for this to cover these risks. So that is really what the only big thing changing this fiscal year is this budget includes approximately $125,000 for outreach as well as public education programs related to a potential ballot measure this November. We have a placeholder for those activities in this budget. With that, there is a reduction overall to this non-departmental budget of 13%. The reason for that is during this current fiscal year, we transferred $674,000 from the general fund, which was budgeted in this non-department. That money was transferred to Park Improvement Fund to do improvements, electrical improvements at when making park. With that, I can answer your questions.
Kevin, do you have a question?
A couple of questions, Andy. On the pension and medical side, you had said at one point you were looking at ways maybe to decrease that, or then there was a movement to find a way to maybe look at, had anything ever come of that?
Yeah, one of the ways we are talking about, again, not specifically on pension as a whole,
right.
What some cities have done is to find a way to prepay that liability up front. And when you do prepay it, then you don't have to pay the 7.5% 5% interest rate that is implied by CalPERS when they set these rates. But to prepay it, though, the city would have to go out and borrow money to do that at a lower cost. The problem that a lot of cities that have done that have faced is they take this money to prepay, and they find out that ultimately some of those liabilities don't actually go away. So as a best practice, the Government Finance Officers Association as well as the League of California Cities are not recommending for cities to actually go borrow money to prepay for these pension liabilities. But on the health side, there are plenty of things that we've done in the past that have helped control this cost, such as capping the amount that the city provides to employee to pay for their health insurance premium. Most importantly is the trust, establishing the trust that I talked about. That was something we started back in 2009, and currently the city has accumulated over $8 million in this account, and half of that amount is actually generated from interest earnings, investment earnings. So the financial plan with this is that eventually we have enough amount in this fund that will help reduce our ongoing payment, the city's ongoing payment for health insurance costs, as well as eliminate this $300,000 set aside that we are contributing on an annual basis into that trust fund.
So we do 300,000 change every year, and then so the $8 million that's sitting in that trust fund, because I remember when it was started, is interest on the $8 million?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the actual city monies that have gone into that account is about 50% of what that total amount is. Wow. So over time, that amount has the amount in that trust fund has generated over $4 million in investment earnings to the city. Again, keep your fingers crossed. Part of that is because of the fortunate events that have happened to the stock market over the last how many years, since 2009 when the recession ended. And so I'm not expecting that amount of investment earnings will be generated in the coming years, but clearly we've done very well with that.
And I have one last question. In terms of the unfunded liability, is there a threshold you meet that you don't have to pay the interest payment on that? And what is it that we owe? I mean, when you hear Corona owes $254 million, things like that unfunded liabilities. So what would our liability, if to be totally whole, what would that number look like?
Right. So the last actuary that was done, I believe it's about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. In the city's unfunded liability for health, I want to say, don't quote me on this because I don't have the number right in front of me, is about $14 million. Okay, and
so we're over halfway there.
So we are over halfway there. That's correct.
And most other cities are not even close to this.
There are some cities that haven't actually set any money aside to fund for this liability.
Right. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Greg, anything?
No, thanks.
Erwin?
On that, Andy, several years ago.
Robin, anything? Andy, I do have one question on this. On your medical insurance for retirees, the $885,123, will that decrease as in time, or is that going to?
That's a good question. This amount is probably going to be increasing as more employees retire.
Okay. But they're paying more into their packet now, into their retirement than before, aren't they?
Yes, so there is a cap.
Okay.
Similar to what we have for active employees. But I guess my answer to that question is as long as the number of retirees increases more than those that are dropping off either because they passed away, this cost is likely to go up. But that is precisely the reason we set up this trust fund, so that once we've accumulated enough fund there, we can draw from the trust fund to fund part of the $800,000 that you're looking at.
Okay. All right, that's what I thought the first time we talked about this. So I know there's a cap, correct? Yes. And you know what the cap is?
The cap is the same as for active employees.
Okay.
It's $1,250
Okay.
A month.
All right, thank you.
But most retirees don't have dependents, so we pay the actual cost, in which case it says the actual cost is $600. That is what the city pays, not the $1,250.
I have a quick question. How many retirees are in the pool right now, and what's their average age?
HR, I think the number is close to 60. I want to say which is.
So we have
than-
more retirees
than
or
we
about
have
this
active.
than we have active
Absolutely.
employees. And so do we know an average age of our retiree pool? Okay. Okay, perfect. Half. Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. All right, thank you. Any more? All right, then we'll go on to Park and Recreations.
Just want to clarify a budget, a bullet, it might be misleading. The second bullet indicates a one-time transfer of $674,000 is the difference. It's actually about $380, that's a net, but we did transfer $674,000 in the 17-18 budget to CIP.
On there, big decrease.
Yeah. It's a net about $380,000, which makes up that 13%.
That was for the lights and for
Correct.
For Waymaking, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Brian, is this one yours?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Council. The first division before you is the 730 Recreation and Community Services. This particular budget is flat. Is regarding some of the same comments are related to this as to where increases are, and they're more relative to the cost of living, increases, PERS, and pension plans, CPI increases that we have added related to contracts, the COLA, and utilities. And so otherwise, this is it. You'll notice that our expenditures are a little lower, mainly to adjustments from estimated salaries, associated benefits, and Gina in her office actually adjusts these throughout the year to make sure that we stay on target based on where our estimates started from. The estimated revenues are a little lower due to we had a church rental at the community center, so we're a little bit down from that. When we do rentals also, and I'll note those throughout the presentation tonight, is that sometimes that'll pick up. We may lose our revenue, so I'm giving you my projection, but next week I could have someone come in and fill that spot. And then every time we would adjust those either through the fiscal year or at mid-year. The budgets for 18-19 expenditures are about 4% or $29,000 higher, increases in pensions and utilities, as I mentioned, and our revenues are about 1% due to lower estimated rentals and community center lower sports field lighting. Let me talk a little bit about sports field lighting. Our youth sports groups pay 100% of their utilities for sports field lighting. Now, saying that, if their use goes down, then so does that revenue. But if their use goes up, then that revenue does go up. So we're a little bit down. That could be related a little bit to numbers of teams, et cetera, but about a little bit lower than what we had originally estimated. The next is our Youth and Teen Services 731. This includes our after-school program and our We Tots program. This also includes adult and youth sports. So our estimated expenditures are a little higher due to we had a workman's comp related injury. That was a youth official. And then we also, our budget expenditures and revenues are traditionally budgeted over recovery costs. So in the case for this particular budget, our revenues for year end are a little bit lower related to that estimate, and then our expenditures are a little bit higher related to that. Our preliminary budget, though, for next year, we are estimating revenues to be higher than our expenditures. And based on my discussion with staff today, I believe that our revenues are actually going to project higher. So you're going to see estimated year-end numbers that will balance out to the expenditure. The next is the 733 budget. This budget, year-end estimate expenditures are higher than amended budget due to our budget estimates. And one of the things that came when we did this budget, if you remember, the water budget had not been part of the general fund. Last year we brought the water into that, and those were estimates. We have a little bit more harder, what I would say, more defined costs associated to that use, and so our adjustments are a little higher than what we were projecting. Also increases to this budget or for next year are related to pension, COLA, and we also are looking at a 10% increase in water usage for the upcoming fiscal year budget 18-19. We also, our revenues are down. As you know, the library has moved to a new facility that was in our earlier estimates. That building is vacant now, so we do not draw a rent off of that building. Although Andy, myself, and Roger are looking at ways of maybe marketing that building and maybe bringing a tenant into that facility to draw some rentals. One of our challenges in that facility is that tenant improvements, or whether we do the improvements, because there's a lot of work that would need to be done. The other part of that particular facility and looking at it is that if putting a tenant in there and whatever type of agreement is done, if we ever develop that, you have a tenant in there. So those are some of the things that we have to weigh in looking at that. So can we get a tenant in a short-term type lease process? So those are some of the strategies that both Roger, myself, and Andy are talking about related to that. This pretty much is the 733 budget.
Sure. And I don't mean to be facetious, but the chamber office is there.
Yeah.
And what do we rent that out to the chamber?
I think it's $1 a year.
Okay. And the facetious part, which I don't mean, but if you're going to market that, one of the concerns that the chamber has is that they have to leave their doors locked because of the transients and the homeless that live there and harass people. So I would like to hear more about your marketing strategy, how you're going to lease that out with knowing that the chamber can't functionally operate with the present conditions that we have there.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Councilmember, and part of our review, and we actually have a meeting next week at the site where we're evaluating, part of that includes looking into this next fiscal year at the trailer, removing it, doing some other things that would remarket that, and that would be part of maybe a capital project we come back, or we look at that as part of our rent for tenant improvements. So there's just some ways we need to look at it, otherwise it becomes that set building that it's going to draw those type of things. And basically right now we board it up and try to do our best to make sure that there is no more break-ins and that type of thing. But it does, a building like that is vacant is going to draw, I believe, transients anyway. So any improvements we can make that, I think, will help the chamber as well.
And everything's out of that building now, right?
That is correct.
From LNCF, so.
Yeah, all out of the trailer. There is nothing in the trailer at this point in time. And actually in the old library offices, it's empty as well. There's, I think we have phone lines and things like that were left over and stuff, but pretty much the building is completely empty.
Good luck moving it.
Yeah.
One other thing on that, the council members, and I know Sheriff's Department's not here, but the council, the chamber office manager doesn't even work out of that office anymore. She works from home because she's unsafe there. So we need to address that. Any other questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
Brian, where are we sitting now with the percentage of revenue towards the parks from the cell towers? About what percentage is that?
Going back, we generate about 158,000 a year in cell sites and cell revenue. Our maintenance in 730, our actual contractual maintenance budget is about 350,000. And so we're generating, a little less than half of that. But I do want to, we'll be bringing back to the City Council 2 items in the near future. One is a new cell site proposed at Parmenter Park, and that would replace an existing light tower there where we have an actual light pole. We'd be putting a new pole in there and a new cell site. This would be a AT&T site. That revenue there is not projected in our revenues because there is not a contract, and typically by the time we get that, we'd only see probably about a half a fiscal year. So as Gina, I think, mentioned earlier in the presentation, we would bring that back, and that would be part of our mid-year budget adjustment. But this one it has been negotiated a little higher than what our previous cell sites have been, including a capital contribution. And then we are just started discussion and negotiations with a cell site which will actually, one of our first cell sites that has actually capped its 20 years, so, or close to it. So they have asked to renegotiate their agreement. So they're coming to a conclusion of that cell site.
Oh my God.
So that allows us then to now, where we were at very low market rates compared to today, to bring that up. So I foresee an increase in those, in that existing one and the new one that would go to the parks operation budget.
Wow, it's scary. I was around for that contract. And where are we exactly with the recycled water in the parks? Does that really save us any money? And how many parks now are online?
I'll let Chad allude to that a little bit, just give you a little more detail. Right now, there is no recycled water in the parks. We are plumbed to some of our facilities,
Right.
but we do not have that service available at this time.
So we'll save that for later, or?
We can, yeah.
You're going to go over that, right? Okay.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's overall.
It'd be part of the capital discussion.
I think Chad is supposed to be presenting us with a workshop on that.
All right.
Recycle water in the near future.
Thank you.
So, Brian, one other thing on, you mentioned, or Kevin mentioned cell sites. The cell building at Ingalls, at the lower parking lot, have we ever taken over the other half of that building?
Yes. Actually, Patty has equipment in there, and that's where we store a lot of our delineators
I'm
and road closures.
just saying, I did never see if we took over that.
No, we do. And that revenue for that particular site is in the 737 or Ingalls part of revenue side.
Okay, so we are functioning that other half as ours. Okay.
Correct.
Robin, do you have anything?
Yeah, I had a question on the 730, Brian, and specifically on the lights and your decrease. Do you remember how many weeks that park was closed and couldn't be used?
At
Wayne Macon.
Yeah. I would say.
Are we going to get that back in the next year? Because they're going to come, regardless of how many teams, those fields are going to be used. They couldn't use them
Right.
because of the safety issue. So it seemed like a long time because I was not driving to practices.
Yeah, there was,
So-
as far as the utility, is that what you're
Right,
saying?
right.
Yeah, there would have been a reduction in some of the utilities that we had there. We wouldn't have received any revenues related
Right.
to rental of lights during that downtime. But you're looking at when football ended to the time we started that project, that's typically also our downtime, because from football to baseball, we don't program anything out there so we use that particular window there, but we would have some activity, particularly travel teams and things like that. So, but it's pretty minimal.
I just know at the start of Little League season, there was a period of time where they couldn't practice over there, and I see the amended budget is at 156, and then for next year, you're at 155. You don't think we'll be back at the standard level where the amended budget was, that it'll still be lower when we move forward? Or is it more than just the little hiccup with the lights?
It's hard to say. I think that we possibly could with
Okay.
increase in numbers, increase in team. That revenue side could come up. Yeah.
Okay.
What we're seeing too is we're seeing some activity too for field use at Clark, and but we've reserved that time for Little League girls softball. So, but we're seeing some activity at least come in related to travel teams. That'll increase that. So that small difference, I could feel comfortable saying we probably will pick it up. But
Okay.
Could I ask a tag team
Go
on
ahead.
that? So, Brian, with the new system, because it's an electricity cost, will the usage for electricity be less because the equipment is better?
Equipment is better. Our issue is fixtures.
Okay, so the fixtures are still the old same old fixtures.
Yep.
They're
If
burned.
we were to, and that is part of our capital discussion.
This is why you resisted getting the new fixtures, because you knew.
No, but I think in the future, when we look at capital, and staff is looking at some alternatives for the future in this, and for on the CIP side of it. And I think if anything we do towards that, or potential LED lighting, we're going to see quite a bit of reduction in utility there.
Any other? Go ahead, Andy.
In terms of one of the reasons why that budget is going down is that current year budget includes a $30,000 for software that is not included in the next coming fiscal year.
Okay. And I guess you're on. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
The senior budget, this particular budget, and this one also allocates the new RCTC grant that we received. We received notification that we've been approved for that grant. These expenditures are higher in matching funds due to the RCT grant award, which includes expansion of the senior transportation program to include a new part-time driver for the vehicle. The city also the city has a match of $40,000 in that line item for the capital outlay for a new bus. I do want to make note of that, even though that is in our bottom line, and Gina can talk a little bit about it, that's already been put aside, but we have to show it for the grant purposes in the budget. So the replacement value, which is $40,000, RCTC will match $40,000. We still have to show it in our budget, although that money has already been accrued and has been put aside, although it has to be identified in the budget. So it's already been collected, but we have to show it in the budget. So relatively speaking, that match is around $35,000 versus the actual what it shows today with the $40,000 in there. The revenues are anticipated to be about 50% less. This is due to lower donations received. We don't generate a lot of revenues in this particular budget, but we sometimes get surprised, and I don't know what Horse Week is going to do yet, so that usually goes into that revenue stream there. So, but our projections are based on what we know today. But I do want to talk a little bit about this particular grant and the benefits. This grant not only benefits our seniors for that level of transportation that the county dial-a-ride program can't, but this serves them to their shopping, medical, doctor's appointments, those type of things. This program also is available to those who are handicapped, and also to our military. They all qualify for this program. So, with that, I'll conclude.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of the director? And we're on building and maintenance. That's yours.
737 is mine as well. This is building maintenance services. This particular budget is inclusive of all public facility infrastructure, primarily most of all the public facility infrastructure. Our estimated year expenditures are higher. We have one workman's comp particular item in that budget, but we also, our estimated year-end revenues are down. We had 3 cancellations at Nellie Weaver Hall that dropped our revenues from us meeting our goals. Again, as I talked about earlier, we may lose a rental, we may keep part of that deposit, but we may also have one come in to fill those gaps. I do also want to make a note that we are reviewing right now as part of our facility fees is the deposits that we hold to make sure that if we do have cancellations that we are collecting a value on the loss of that particular date that we could have marketed by that deposit. So at least something that's more reasonable than what we already have or that we are proposing this in this case. The 18-19 budget expenditures are higher. We have minimum wage increases. In fact, actually, minimum wage increases in our department in the previous budgets you would see is we are primarily have a lot of part-time employees. So in the 730, 731, 735, and also in the 737 and 733 budgets, you would see the minimum wage increase is also projected in this, as well as the COLA, as well as those pension increases that we have talked about throughout the whole presentation tonight. We also have in this particular preliminary budget request a capital outlay of about for $25,000. We need to put some money into our footings up at both Clark and Marino Arena. So we've set aside money in the budget to deal with the footings in those particular arenas. Then our revenues are $1,700 due to some of those rentals. That could be a change or increase as we are out trying to restore those particular dates or make those dates available to and let people know that those are now available. Our challenge sometimes is when we book a facility and you have a pre-booking that could be as far as almost 24 months out in advance, and we get a cancellation within that time, to get that back out and book it is a challenge. And so we have to really look at how our process a little bit in there and how we can maybe, if those cancellations do happen, that at least we're getting some compensation back should we not re-rent that facility. And this concludes the 737 budget. This budget, I do want to make sure that everyone understands, this deals with all public facilities, including both fire stations, the sheriff's station, City Hall, and Ingalls, as well as any of the ancillary type of buildings within the city.
Any questions for the director on this one?
Yeah, Brian, back on your deposits, that is there a typical refund that you have if it's going to cost me $1 to rent the facility? What do you typically hold back right now as a non-refundable deposit?
The deposit is 50% or $50, whichever is greater. That's currently in the policy related to that rental. Now, the problem is our deposits, that's if they cancel within like for example, if it's less than 90 days and they cancel on us, then that's what the policy says. The problem is that we're not holding back enough deposit to really evaluate that. So it may be worth it if our deposit is $100 to cancel in less than 90 days versus that was a $3,000 rental. So we really need to really look at our deposits in that situation. So
would you know, or as you go further into that, on a rental, that you would project a certain profit and overhead on that rental, and that number is what would be your minimum to hold back if you had to refund a deposit?
I think that could be done. Our fee schedule that we, by resolution, doesn't break it out that way, but it is something I guess we could look at or have the policy written so that is calculated at the beginning when that contract is signed. So the permit holder actually understands what that value is, so when they put that on there, then they know they're only going to get so much back if they counsel within this thing. If you counsel way out here, we have the opportunity to re-rent it, then we'll refund you your whole deposit. That's the way we do it now, but actually evaluating what that worth is based on that cost or overhead of lost revenue is.
I think that would be a good way to look at it. Thanks.
Appreciate the comment.
Kevin?
Just a couple of questions, Brian. So to sort of piggyback off of Greg, so 3 major rentals, how much did that account for?
Well, as you can see here, we are looking at almost $8,000.
So with the $100 deposit, 50%, I'm confused.
Well, no, I'm just saying, I don't know exactly what that deposit was.
So that wasn't the exact amount.
So let's say the deposit for those 3 rentals was
$1,000.
Was $1,000.
They pay $500.
Yeah, and in this case, those rentals could have, those particular 3 rentals could have generated $8,000 in revenues.
Got it.
They were projected, but our deposit is $1,000. So if I counsel, I got $1,000 when I should have gotten $8,000.
Right. And then there's been a lot of talk about moving the grandstands from, would we be able to generate more income if we move the grandstands from, we were just talking about this, from Nellie Weaver up to the arena?
That's a great question because we have a bleacher fee. But we also have
his idea. I wish I could take credit for it.
We have certain agreements that actually have a flat fee. I think all of those agreements would have to be renegotiated, and then anyone coming in to use that facility would pay a rate.
Well, that's my point. I mean, wouldn't we, rather than people going out to rent grandstands, what if they paid us to rent our grandstands? And when can we move this stuff?
Well, that needs to be part of our CIP discussion. But we have been looking at that and what it would cost to move those, relocate them, and then in my discussions with the groups who have that interest, they're willing to pay for that capital cost to relocate those, but they also want to expand them. So we need to figure out what that would be, because if you're at 15 rows and you want to go to now 25 rows, then there's a difference in cost. So
I think that's something, Andy, maybe we should look at. If possible, do it sooner than later. I know you guys are busy, but it would just seem to me, rather than having to rent those grandstands, that could be a way for us to make some money and make it easier on them, because I would assume our rental would be a little bit cheaper than what it would be to rent from the outside.
Yeah, I think it depends on the discussion. Our 3 primary users of those grandstands, those groups, which are the fair, Horse Week, and also the Posse Rodeo. Right now, what we collect off of those, you could add the additional seating would be that charge. The challenge would be probably with Horse Week, because Horse Week pays a flat fee in its lease agreement and does not include any bleacher revenue at all. So, and if we're looking at renegotiating, now, in my discussions, the 3 groups are also going to come up with capital. So if I'm going to come up with $100,000 to relocate and expand those, I would imagine if I'm going to invest in that, I would want some sort of negotiation in that investment as well. So I think those are all the discussions that we would have to have with
I also think
those investors in that.
The expansion of the seats would also maybe attract other venues, because right now there's not enough seats to have a major concert.
And that's right. And the increase that we've talked about is trying to get it close to around 4,000 seats. Right. And we're at around 2,100 seats, give or take. It depends on, Councilman Hoffman.
Actually,
based
the goal is 9,000 is what we want. Actually,
based on the code, although not very many people have 18-inch butts to put in a seat, so that's really the challenge there. But honestly, these are great discussions, and we can probably look at those. You're all right. That gives us an opportunity to increase particular new activities to come to that venue.
We digress, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please. Anything over that end, Berwin or Robin?
I have a question. The last bullet point talks about revenues being 7% lower because of reduced rentals and Nellie Weaver Hall. That's significant in my opinion. So can we get some reasoning behind that, or some
Yeah, well, the three we don't have, we haven't rebooked the three, and then we have some other rentals that are not out there. Those are our estimates, and as I said, that could change as we move into the new fiscal year. I do think we need to really take a good look at Ingalls as itself and look at how we want to run and manage it, as well as look at the marketing. We don't put a lot of marketing into it. One, we don't have really a budget for it to help produce that, but I think there are things that we can do at Ingalls that would enhance that facility or make it more marketable for those uses. One of the things where we lose time on you're looking at particularly Nellie Weaver Hall, it's a 10,000 square foot facility. Where we lose is during the week of trying to solicit to have meetings and try and fill days. Weekends we do pick up, or those ones that we do lose, we typically will backfill those somewhere. These are our projections for right now. However, I think there are still some days in there and weekdays that could be perhaps added to that use of that facility where we're recovering those costs. Andy and I have talked about taking Ingalls and maybe even having a study session on it. I think it would be valuable to the council and looking at the numbers of what it costs, which each cost center area costs, and what revenues we actually generate from those particular areas.
Yeah, I guess that number is just concerning to me. And then when we talk about Nellie Weaver Hall and George Ingalls Event Center, and in my opinion, it's like this vicious circle because we need to book more stuff, but we're not maintaining or upgrading the facilities. And so people aren't going to come, or we don't have enough staffing to staff the events the way they need to be staffed so people's needs are met. And so I'm getting frustrated because I just don't think we're ending the cycle. We just talk in circles around it and we're not doing anything about it. And it's super frustrating to me. I know we've talked about the bleachers before, and my understanding was we were going to move forward on some engineering so we can give the groups that want to help us some hard numbers so they can help us. And that was a couple months ago. So I kind of feel like on this particular issue, we need to step up and get it done so that those groups that want to help us can help us and we can move forward. So that's all I have.
Erwin, anything? I got a couple things. And we talked about the loss of the rentals at Nellie Weaver, but have you increased the rentals up at the arenas at the same time?
We're booking more rentals up at Ingalls. And we have done better. Our challenge, I'll be honest with you, we don't have adequate staffing.
Right, and that's what this cycle is that Robin was talking about.
Yeah, and the problem then is the general fund. We do not generate enough revenues to support the full cost of this facility, bottom line. And I don't foresee us ever doing that. I see it subsidized.
Brian, I've been to many of
But I do see that it can become an economic engine, but there's no way that we can adequately maintain that facility, do all of the things that we would love to see done with the level of staffing that we have.
And Robin made a good point, and this goes back to Roger and his thing, economic development. We capitalize on the facilities we have in town, also to generate our tourist dollars and our people coming into the area and to spend their money. And Ingalls is part of that plan. And so that's where I think that you need this workshop, you need this study to figure out how to market this thing a little better. Where right now you have a limited staff that's doing the best they can with what they have, but we need to rethink this thing. We can't keep going the same model. And I'm not saying this is, in the last 5 years, it's increased tremendously. The customer service is getting up there, but we're still stagnant. As the bleacher thing, that was a 2-year idea. It's been 2 years we've been kicking this around. And all the other expansion that we have up there that we want to do. And I know that for those who think that this is going to be a big money maker, it's not. I can tell you the City of Industry, the Wanapinelli Equestrian Center, they're subsidized also too by everything else. So if we think it's going to be a big money maker, it'll never be a money maker. But I don't want to. But I'm just getting on here on the And as far as what with the fair and Horse Week also don't pay the bleacher costs. I think the only one paying the bleacher cost, the full cost, the full burden cost is the posse and the rodeo.
Yes.
So the difference in, for my colleagues up here and for the audience, $9 a seat rental is what they're paying for that 18 inches of board space versus what we have to kind of limit their cost to. So that's what they're looking at too, as those groups. And with that, you still have animal control to go to?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is the animal control budget. Estimated year expenditures slightly lower, amended based on some benefits and savings. In 18-19 budget, we're seeing a 6% increase due to salary costs associated with minimum wage increases and adjustments related to benefits, PERS, cost of living increase in there, and then also contract service increase due to CPI increases. 2018-19 revenue, we have a slightly decrease. Most of that, we believe, is related to our 3-year dog licensing program. And that may change because every year I think that's going to change, adjust down, but I get surprised and people buy more 3-year dog licenses along with their vaccinations. So we have seen an increase in that, and when we do that, that's where our revenues have gone up. So we are projecting a smaller increase because we think that will taper off, primarily related to the 3-year licensing program. And that's all I have for 765.
Any questions? Greg, Kevin, Berwin? No? Okay. All right, with that, before we jump into Chad, I think we're gonna, it's 5:45, and I know it's disappointing to Chad. You're that close, I heard that. Go ahead, Greg.
Just a couple of quick questions. Gina? Way back early in the presentation, on page 3, preliminary budget included 3% salary adjustment for employees. On page 14, under the Waterfront revenues, or expenditures, excuse me, we show salaries and benefits increasing 6%, which I could say I could attribute to benefits and things like that. But then on sewer, on page 17, salaries and benefits are increasing 13%. So my question is, why wouldn't it kind of be like 3% or 6%? Why is 6 becoming 13 between water and sewer?
Obviously, Chad will address that.
Okay, so we can do that next
presentation,
time?
But I believe part of that has to do with reallocation of salaries between water and sewer fund.
Okay. And Chad will just address that next time on that. And then just my last question, at what point in upcoming meetings can we discuss a little further, like sheriff's budget and items like that?
At any time, until the budget is adopted.
Okay.
Any additional, we'll continue to have discussions on the budget until they're adopted.
So perhaps at the next meeting,
Yeah,
we'll
that'd be
do that
fine.
as a recap before we go into the CIP budget. If that's okay with the rest of the council, you'll get a chance to digest this over the next 2 weeks. And then, but before we adjourn, Kevin, do you have anything else?
Just an observation that from 2012 to 2019, our budget jumped $7 million, and I'm not really asking a question, but I kind of want to know if this is usual or is it a sign of the times? From 2012 to 2019, we literally jumped roughly almost $7 million. And is it usual for a 7-year period for that to happen? I'm also curious, and again, this is just something maybe you can find out, do we have any projections at all what the hotel income will be when it comes in? Are we confident that employee versus contract labor? And right up front, I'm not a great believer in using contract labor for public works in case there's an accident. You want those people there, but I want to make sure that we are using contract labor whenever possible as opposed to employees, particularly at Ingalls. I'm also in favor, if we can somehow, to find a way to do more staffing up at Ingalls. Just, again, we may not be able to do it. I also think we need to really visit the marketing for Ingalls Park, just in terms of how we're selling that. I realize it's never going to be a big moneymaker, but I also think that, I don't know, there's things, I felt Robin's pain because I still don't quite understand why the flowers aren't there and the plants aren't there, and I'd love to get that stuff over there. Just an observation, we spent $250,000 for economic development. About that, what was it, 2 something altogether? And if you really stop and think about it, in my opinion, that's money well spent. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but when you think about the hotels and stuff that are coming to town, and you also look at the incredible amount of stuff that's coming out of that department, Kelly and Cheryl and everybody, I mean, the stuff they're making internally is stuff that is very expensive in the real world. So I'm really pleased with all of that. And I think that's I have some other questions and things that I'll call. And the other thing I'd love to visit, and I know we're looking at somehow making the pole barns and stuff, making Ingalls Park look better. And I think that's something we've talked about for a long time. But other than that, I'm actually pretty pleased with the report and the way it was laid out. I think in the time I've been here, this is the best laid out report that I've seen, except the 219 and 218, and you screwed up there, Gina. I got to watch you every second because now I got to look at all the numbers, make sure they're right.
I live in different fiscal years every day.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Rowan, anything?
Nothing, sir.
Thank you, Robin.
So just for my clarification, at the next meeting is when we can bring our ideas for tweaks and suggestions and all
Correct.
of that. Is that correct?
I think what we'll do is after Chad does his Public Works and Engineering, that's the rest of you, right? On there, I didn't see any other, and Steve, okay. And then we'll go and do we'll comment on this one, and then before we do the infrastructure budget on the CIP.
And I will also be discussing some potential budget cuts.
That you will have for the general and the CIP?
No, not the CIP.
Because their CIP is pretty bare bones.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank all you that attended. I know they're taking out of your afternoon. Appreciate that. It's, as you can see from the numbers. And Andy, when will this be posted up on? The budget is posted now. The preliminary.
I don't think it's on the website anywhere, but we can.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
If we can, yeah. So the people that are here, and then the other restaurants can see where we're at, and then we'll continue this on May 16th. But with this, further adjourn it. Thank you.